Good evening, sir. Good evening, classmates. So, yung gagawin ko po ngayon is yung creating triggers. So, punta tayo sa lab developing SQL databases. So, ito yung mga lab guide. So, piliin po natin yung creating triggers. Click start. Click next. And power on the plug SQL01. Exercise 1 Working DDL Triggers. Triggers are specific kind of stored procedures that are executed automatically in response to certain actions or events in the database. A trigger can also be referred to as a database object attached to a table. There are basically three types of events occurring in a database. These are as follows: data definition language or DDL events, data manipulation language or DML events, database operation events. You can create triggers on events associated with database objects. You can create multiple triggers for any specific event. Triggers are used to monitor the changes in data and maintain consistency and accuracy of the modified data. In SQL Server, you can create DDL triggers using transact SQL statement to respond to events such as create, alter, drop, and so on. Task 1. Create a DDL trigger. In this task, you will create a DDL trigger on the table that executes automatically whenever the table is modified or dropped. Step 1. Ensure you have powered on the required devices and connect to Club SQL01. Step 2. From the Club SQL01 desktop, click Start and click Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. The Connected Server dialog box appears. From the server type drop-down list, click Database Engine. In the server name text box, type Club SQL01, click Connect. Hanapin natin yung Microsoft SQL Server 2016 and Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And then click Connect. Step 3. The SQL Server Management Studio windows open. In the Object Explorer, click plus to expand the databases folder. Step 4. To select the database from the list of databases, click AdventureWorks DW 2016 CTP to create a new query from the query ribbon. Click New Query. Step 5. The new query pane opens. Step 6. To create a new table, type the following query in the new query pane. Copy, paste. In this query, you will create a table with the columns having int data types. Step 7. To run the query, click execute or press F5. Step 8. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy, paste. Step 9. To run the query, click execute or press F5. Task 2. Use the DDL trigger. In this task, you'll check how the DDL trigger executes when the database table is altered or dropped. Furthermore, if you want to execute the DDL events without restriction, you can delete the DDL trigger from the database. Step 1. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy, paste. To run the query, click Execute and press F5. Step 3. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy and paste. Step 4. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 5. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy and paste. Step 6. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Next. Exercise 2. Working with DML triggers. DML triggers execute automatically when DML events occur on the table or view defined in the trigger. DML events are transact SQL statements such as insert, update, delete, and so on. These are triggering events can be mentioned using the OR keyword of relevant execution. DML triggers help to protect the accuracy of the information in the database when subjected to changes. A DML trigger will execute once for every statement that is run on the table, irrespective of the number of the rows that are modified in the table. In this exercise, we will learn to create a DML trigger using transact SQL statements. Task 1. Create a DML trigger using the for keyword. In this task, we will use transact SQL statements to create a DML trigger on a table to update the data specified. Step 1. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy and paste. Step 2. To run query, click Execute or press F5. Step 3. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy, paste. Step 4. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 5. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy, paste. Step 6. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 7. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 9. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 10. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 11. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Task 2. Create a DML trigger using the after keyword. If you use the after keyword while creating a DML trigger, it runs only after the execution of the associated DML events. You can use the after keyword only in the DML triggers that are defined on tables and not on views. Step 1. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Step 2. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 3. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 5. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Step 6. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 7. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Step 9. To create a new query from the ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 10. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Task 3. Create a DML trigger using the instead of keyword. In a DML trigger, the instead of keyword runs before the associated DML events, and this task will create a DML trigger using the instead of keyword. Step 1. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 3. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy, paste. Step 4. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 5. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Step 6. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Step 7. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Step 8. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. To run the query, click Execute or press F5. Exercise 3. Working with Logan triggers. Whenever there is an occurrence of Logan event in the database, the Logan triggers execute stored procedures. The Logan event occurs when you, as a database user, establish a session with the database when you log into the database. After the authentication process, the Logan trigger executes executes. Therefore, Logan triggers execute before you establish the session. The SQL Server error logs collect the alert or the error messages that you include in the Logan triggers. Suppose if the login authentication process is unsuccessful, the Logan triggers will not execute. You can control and monitor the server sessions using logon triggers. You can also use logon triggers to stop the creation of the database user sessions. You must create logon triggers in real-time environment only in unavoidable circumstances. Create a logon Task 1. Create a Logan trigger. And this task will create a Logan trigger. Step 1. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Copy. To run the query, click Execute and press F5. Step 3. To create a new query from the query ribbon, please click New Query. Step 4. To run the query, click Execute and press F5. Step 5. To create a new query from the query pane, click the New Query. To run the query, click Execute and press F5. Note: the result is dynamic in nature, will define in real. Step 6. To create a new query from the query ribbon, click New Query. Note: in this demonstration, the total hit count to the database has already crossed the specified limit on the 5 sessions. Therefore, if you try to create a new query, the Logan trigger will execute as you are trying to establish a new session with the database. And that's all. Thank you. Power of the plug SQL01. Exit. That's all. Thank you.